Please note if a specified person or public body does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or written submissions to the township of Portsmouth before the decision is made, a specified person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the township of Portsmouth to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, if a specified person or public body does not make an oral submission at a public meeting or make written comments to the township persons before the decision is made, a person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless an opinion of the board there are reasonable grounds to do so. You may wish to talk to the township staff regarding the information on this appeal process. The format of this public meeting as follows. The applicant or agent will present the purpose and details of the application and any further information. The township's planner will then provide a brief presentation. Following this, the public can obtain clarification, ask questions, and express their views on a proposal. Members of the public are permitted 10 minutes each to ask questions and express their views. The time limit is imposed to provide each member of the public an opportunity to speak. And then council will have an opportunity to ask any clarification questions. The applicant and a township's planning consultant will attempt to answer questions or respond to any concerns this evening. If this is not possible, the applicant or staff will follow up and obtain the information. Responses will be provided when this matter is brought forward and evaluated at a later date. Before we get into the report, I'd just like to acknowledge the presence of our county councilor, Mr. Bowman, in the audience. Thank you. Okay, so we'll start with the report and application. This public meeting involves an application by WDD Main Street Inc. Zoning bylaw application D14 WDD Main Street Inc. Part Lot 31 Concession 8 Township of Portsmouth County, Wellington. The purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to amend the Township of Portsmouth's new comprehensive zoning bylaw 23-2018 to rezone the lands from urban residential UR, future development 2, FD2, and natural environment NE zone to urban residential site-specific special provisions UR-SP XX zone and natural environment NE zone with environment protection EP overlay. Okay, with the owner and the applicant, please get ready to make the presentation, and with Ms. Huda, please display the property sketch or any presentation material the applicant has provided.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As I said, my name is Kaylee Robbins. I'm the planner for the applicant. So we are here tonight as the second public meeting for the zoning bylaw amendment application. I see some familiar faces in the room here. So the intent of this meeting is really not to go through everything that we've already presented. We've tried to scope the materials that we are discussing today based on the feedback we received from the last public meeting, which just to kind of summarize was mostly related to traffic and transportation concerns. So that's what we're focusing on in our presentation, but we are available to ask questions regarding other matters of the application. Next slide, please. So just as a quick overview, kind of some items we discussed at the last public meeting. So the intent of this zoning bylaw amendment application is to provide increased housing opportunities in the Morrison community. We are trying to propose something that's in keeping with the fabric of the community. And that's where you see 1 to 2 story dwellings, approximately 25 to 3,000 square feet. As part of this application, we are also proposing protection of the natural heritage features and their functions for the long term through the zoning provisions. We're also proposing improvements to the existing street network. So this would include upgrades to the existing Ox Street to design that per township standards. And then we're also looking at relocating the current retaining wall at the Ox Street and Badenoch intersection to improve those current sightlines, which we know are our concern. And then we are proposing a scale of development that can be supported from the private servicing perspective. Next slide, please. So this might be a bit tough to see on the screen, so perhaps I'll just speak to it. So the green area is the environmental protection lands. The yellow it's the proposed lot fabric. The blue is the proposed stormwater management facility. And then the purple there is a new municipal street. So with the callouts that you can't quite see on the screen here is some additional information regarding the transportation network. So based on the initial development of this concept and then after the last public meeting, we did go back to MTO to discuss an access to Highway 6 with them. It is unfortunately not an option. It is a controlled access highway, and they do have significant concerns with any new access to Highway 6. And that aside, it would also traverse the existing wetland, which the Conservation Authority would not be supportive of in encroaching in that existing wetland. We also reviewed the Main Street access, as that was a comment that came up at the last public meeting as well. And in conversation with our traffic engineer, and I'm sure I'll provide comments tonight as well, those sight lines are also deficient because of the crest of Badenoch. And there's also issues with the proximity of that access to the Highway 6 and Badenoch intersection. Working with the township, based on the comments received from the public meeting, there is a potential to convert Back Street to a one-way street. We don't anticipate traffic for this development to travel on Back Street. Obviously, it can happen. That's not what we're anticipating. We do anticipate traffic traveling onto Badenoch, turning onto Ox directly into the development. But based on the concerns and the potential for using that street, I think the township is exploring converting that to the one-way. And I don't know if there's been a decision on that. I can obviously let the township speak to that a little later. And our traffic engineer has assessed the sight lines at Badenoch based on surveyed speed of the street, and the sight lines do meet the requirement with the shifting of the retaining wall. So through this application, we understand there are existing concerns with the road network. And with this application, we are proposing improvements to prepare or to provide a better road network for existing residents as well as future residents with the improvements to Ox Street and the relocation of the retaining wall. So that is really the presentation tonight. I obviously am available to discuss other components of the application, but I wanted to focus on the traffic items as coming out from the last public meeting. Thank you.
So let's turn it over to our township planning consultant, Jessica Auspis, to present their information report, which is included as part of the agenda.
Yeah. So, thank you. Can we turn it to the next slide? So this application, as mentioned, is related to 23 hectares of land in northeast of Highway 6 in Morriston. The subject lands would be our access for Main Street, which is located southeast of the site, and Ox Street, located northeast of the Main Street entrance, and also connects to Badenoch Street East. This slide, so in terms of the application process, this slide outlines the development process regarding the proposal. The first submission was received by the township in March 2023. And there were also 5 subsequent submissions since that time. Notice of complete application and public meeting were issued on January 31st, 2025. Minutes of council indicate and direct staff to hold an additional public meeting for the application. So there was already one public meeting that occurred March 5th, 2025. This is the second public meeting that has been required as per council minutes. The applicant, through the process, we've been working collaboratively with the applicant to address various comments as they have been received. We're providing a recommendation report at this time. But at a future date, there will be a recommendation report. Outlining our planning opinion. So, next slide, please. So as indicated, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, it was facilitated. So as indicated, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment would facilitate a subdivision consisting of 21 single detached dwellings, a stormwater management facility, and also natural environment lands and public street as was shown. There is a concurrent application of draft plan of subdivision that's being considered by the county at this time as well to actually facilitate the creation of these lots and blocks. So there are various environmental features on the lands that have been identified, including including a non-provincially significant and unevaluated wetlands, significant woodlands, regulated and non-regulated water courses. And the regulated water courses also include floodplain. The surrounding lands are residential and commercial uses, and directly northwest of the subject lands are residential parcels of varying sizes. So I'd like to turn it to the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the location which I identified. One more slide, please. So we have heard several comments from the public to date. And I'll provide a summary as well as some of the considerations regarding those comments. So these are basically the bigger comments that have come from the public, and we are hearing them as we're going through the process. So the first comment is regarding the location of the access. As indicated, means there was two options that were requested to be considered. Main Street as well as Highway 6. Both of them have issues. So Main Street is less than the 20-meter required boulevard width as existing. Ox Street does have that required boulevard width. The paved portion may not be, it may have to be reevaluated, but if Main Street were to be used, you would have to take some land, some private lands. A Highway 6 is not an option because it's a controlled access. There were concerns regarding sightlines. A sightline analysis was completed in accordance with the requirements of the township and the county. The assessment confirmed that sufficient sightlines are available, conditional on the realignment of Ox Street and shifting of a retaining wall. That retaining wall is at Dun Ox, just at the southwest corner. The location of mailboxes was raised as a concern. Right now, there's the location of mailboxes has not been determined. However, through the process and addition and recommendations for conditions of approval, we will be considering locations or requesting locations that do not encourage access onto Back Street. The length of the public road was raised as a matter. So there are two, and specifically with respect to a comment was brought up with respect to safety. So the chief building official and the fire chief don't have concerns regarding the length of the road. The reason is because there's two water reservoirs being proposed one in front of lot 18 and one across from lot 16. There were comments regarding dark sky compliance. So the township zoning bylaw has provisions requiring lighting to be confined to the vicinity of the lot. So that's lighting on the private lands. Regarding lighting on the public lands, I know right now the township doesn't have specific standards on that. And then the last concern or comment that came up was regarding the internal grade of the roads. We know that the Public Works is not concerned has reviewed the application and does not have concerns regarding the grades of the public roads. So. So I guess, yeah, so that's what I have.
Great, thank you very much.
For questions.
So we'll turn it over to the public now to ask their questions. What I'd like you to do is come forward to the stand, state your name and address for the record, and then ask your questions or provide any comments. Understand that there's two members of the community, Kathy McNabb and Lucy DeJong, who have a presentation ready. So we'll ask you to come first and do your presentation.
Thanks very much, everyone. I'm Kathy McNabb. This is my neighbor, Lucy. My husband, Hans Jurgensen, put this together after we left the last meeting last time, where we were really talking about traffic and that sort of aspect of all of this. And he went and did a little more just digging on his own, because he was just really concerned that the back street access, we call it back street. I know it used to be called Oak Street there, and that's actually one of the points that I wanted to make. This council has always been really great about, listening to residents and our concerns about danger and liability and that sort of thing. And that used to be called Oak Street, and like the CFL, we had like 10 streets in Morrison, and 2 of them had the same name. And we live right at the corner where this retaining wall is, and we would constantly get people knocking on our door looking for number 12 Oak Street or number whatever, and there was none. There's 2 of us there. And it was sort of comical at first, and then it became annoying, and then it became a problem when it was an ambulance one day. And that's when we called council at the time and said, can we do something about this? And right away, they got on it and they changed it to back street. So that was a great example of the proactivity that we've always appreciated from Whistler Council and listening to our concerns. So that's why Hans put this together tonight. Now, unfortunately, he couldn't be there. He had a thing, so he couldn't get out of. So he asked myself and Lucy and her husband, Mike, to kind of listen to his concerns. He put it together last night. So really, this is all of our concerns. So, yeah, our goal with it is really to just express why we don't think the back street access is a good idea, based on our observations of living there for over 20 years. So I'll just go through it here, but so we're talking about the 21 houses of unknown size. We did find out last time, and as you said, 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. But as Mike asked last time, could they be bigger? And the answer was they could. So could there be ARUs in them? I understand it's a right in Puslinch. They could, and home businesses are going to be allowed from what we understand. So that just generates a lot of traffic. None of this is about the size of the house, the look of the house, or any of that. There's no NIMBYism at all. It's nothing to do with that. We agree that development is good, but just don't access it there. So the sight lines create a blind intersection. You say that that's been addressed, but well, it seems like we have some conflicting information, so I love clarification. The narrow portion of Back Street, the east-west part at the back, is not suitable for 2-way traffic, and 1-way is just going to clog it up even more. The grade of the proposed road, now you've addressed that, so that's great if that's all good. And then the access and entrance when the 401 is blocked, which, as we know, happens regularly. So if you can go to the next slide. Hans took a bunch of pictures. So here's the intersection as it is with the offending retaining wall. And as it is very, very bad, which we all agree moving that retaining wall will give us much better lateral sight lines, but it won't do anything about seeing through the hill. The hill is the hill. We can't see through it coming or going. So thank you. So there's the location. So it's 80 kilometers, it's 50 kilometers an hour is the speed limit going through there. Further to the east, just before you start coming in to the town, it's at 80 kilometers, and you can see it's a big wide open road. People go 80 and they don't rarely slow down to 50 there. They just keep going because the road environment is built. And it looks like it's an 80-kilometer road. And so that just kind of illustrates that. And again, this is not about, we don't like the look of the houses or anything. It's just the trend in Morriston, and Hans went out and took pictures. All the houses seem to be large. They're built for, they're not small cottages, they're built for lots of people, multi-generational, additional family members, nannies. So it's not about, size doesn't matter, it's the number of vehicles and cars. So the bigger the house, the more cars, the more residents, the more traffic, and that's the concern for us. So he's got a few pictures of the samples of the trend, and I don't see, they've all got 4-car garages, 3-4 cars, as Hans says. Yeah, can keep going with Fun Lake, so. As Hans says, almost all of the homes have 3-car garages, except for the ones that have 4-car garages. So when you add up the cars, if you say 3 to 5 cars per home times 21 homes, that's another 63 to 105 cars. Now, then you add in the ARUs, which, as we said, they are right. Basement apartment, another 10 to 40 cars, and that's just the residents. And then we have the non-resident traffic. So what we're asking is that if you cannot just look at the little traffic study, Lucy says that the traffic study that was done before, there was a camera at the end of her driveway for overnight. And sure, there's not a lot of traffic on that corner there, but now you add all of this in. So we're just asking if council can consider looking ahead, not just at what might be there now or when 21 homes are put in. Because when you add in all of that plus the non-resident traffic, they've got a daycare, now you've got another people coming and going, dropping off the kids twice a day. You've got a tax consultant or a hairstylist, there's more people coming and going. Amazon deliveries, food deliveries, PSWs, that's a lot of traffic on that little road. And the reason that we're concerned about it is that that's a very dangerous intersection. Back Street, and you can go to the next slide, Back Street and Badnock Street, it's got that hill, that blind hill, and you can move the retaining wall, but you can't move the hill. So this is some speed data that we collected. Now, I don't know, I understand that you have some as well, but this is, Hans got this email to him from Wellington County, and you can see the average speed was 66 kilometers an hour, with the 85th percentile at 76. So that's a lot faster than the 50 that's posted. And then if we go to the next slide, the minimum sight lines for 50 kilometer an hour is 130 meters. And Hans had Pasquale Costanza from the Wellington County Road Departments come out and do a sightline measurement. And at that intersection, he saw that it was 121 meters. So it's not sufficient. And that's at 50 kilometers an hour, and they're not doing 50 kilometers an hour. The study with this, now, the study was from a couple of years ago, but they haven't slowed down. I think anecdotally, we can tell you that it's not slowing. So I think that this is sort of the basis of our concern right here, is that it's just too, you can't see through the hill. You can move that retaining wall and see across, but you can't see through it, either coming east to west or west to east. Especially in the winter, especially when it's slippery, it's just an accident waiting to happen, literally. especially when you add in all that extra traffic coming and going in that one area. So that's the crux of our concern. And if you go to, you can see now nosing, you won't have to nose out as far. Right now, you have to nose way out before you can even hope to look up, especially if you want to make a left. If you move that retaining wall, that will help. But the hill is right there. So I don't understand how that will help. Maybe you guys could clarify that for us. And then here's the actual back street. That is no way that can be a two-way street. Now, you've addressed the possibility of turning that into a one-way street, but how are you going to enforce that? Are you gonna have OPP sitting there and catching people? We've asked for it often on the hill to try and catch the speeders. And we rarely have OPP presence there. I can't imagine them sitting around the back street trying to catch people going the wrong way. There'd be no place to park. There's nowhere for them to park. Exactly. So all the traffic, whichever way you put it, all the traffic is down, you can't even go around. The 12 homes that use this area now, we make it work by tucking into one another's driveways and it's fine. You can't add another 30, 40 cars in there and hope for that to work. And school buses, we've both seen school buses trying to get down there, especially in the winter, especially when there's snow pile there, backing up into Lucy's driveway. It's running over your grass, running over my lawn. It's just not set up for what I believe you propose to have happen there. That is our concern. You've addressed the grade, and this was another concern that we had, so we took a picture of the grade there. Now you've addressed that and said your public works feel that they can get a snow plow up and down there. And again, we'll leave it to your expertise for that. The EDR, with all of that traffic now, we've got a whole lot more people trying to make a left-hand turn there when the 401 is closed. That would be the same at Main or and back, which is why our real goal, if we go to the conclusion, is we really were hoping that we could encourage you to do the best that you can to work with the MTO and work on Highway 6. Now, you've said that you've asked. I don't know how persuasive you were or you can be. I know that I've contacted our MPP, sorry, and haven't gotten anywhere, but that's because of the election and all of that was going on. I think that got moved aside. We do know that you would probably have more clout with them than we would, but even council would have a little more clout. I understand the bypasses, no one wants to hear about that anymore. But there are the traffic calming measures, which you have worked out with, and if this could somehow be proactively, a little bit of future thinking, a little bit of not just going quick, cheap, easiest route, but maybe the route that is more forward thinking for our community as a whole. We would really appreciate if you could find out exactly what the MTO's issues are with it, why they can't come up with some creative solutions. I don't think it has to be anything that creative, a roundabout, a stoplight. You know, there's doable from my naive point of view. So that would be our first ask, is that if you, in the last slide will tell you what we are requesting. And we're just gonna ask, I'm not sure how that works, what you have to answer, but so we're going to request MTO to confirm in writing the denial of the access off of Main Street and their consideration. So first of all, highway off of Highway 6. And if not, you said that Main Street is not a consideration, but we'd like to ask them to confirm why the proximity to Highway 6 was expressed to us, but I don't, and that it is not a great, um, it doesn't have the sightline requirements as well, but neither does Back Street. So why is one so much, worse than the other? Because we feel that at least Main Street doesn't have that hill. So if it's the best of the two, we would prefer neither. We would prefer Highway 6. But if you have to pick one of those, we would prefer Main Street. So in that light, request township study Back Street and Main Street and determine which access possesses the least risk or liability to the township. Because it comes back to the township there. As with the Oak Street example, when we had an ambulance show up at our door, the township was on it quickly because they realized this is a problem. We can't have this. So knowing that another 60 cars or 50 cars coming and going on the back street is a potential problem. Can you just go ahead with that and go, well, okay, that's it. So we'd like you to at least look at the two and maybe pick the worst of the bad. Confirm the post boxes will be located within the new development. You've addressed that. And I'm sorry, Hans put this together obviously before we can do this. Don't support the one-way traffic on the back street. It's really a bad idea. It's just way too narrow to do two-way, and one-way is just gonna clog everything up going down our portion of Back Street, the north-south portion of Back Street. The one-way east to west makes Main Street an unofficial entrance anyway. People are gonna go in Main Street. If it's made one way, can you ensure compliance though with the OPP to come and look? I don't see how you can, but maybe you can, and we'd love to know how. If Back Street is approved as the entrance, then the east-west portion should be upgraded to two-way and on Back Street. And I don't know how you're gonna do that, but I think that would be the least that could happen. So that it wasn't just all funneling along Bagnock. And if the township, I'm not saying here. If the township does not approve the development proposal using Back Street as an access, based on the increased liability the township will incur, can a developer or the OLT force the township to take the increased risk when another access is possible with less risk to the township? So that's what we were just discussing, and this was Mike's real point. And knowing the risks, knowing the sight line is not within the guidelines, as Pasquale Costanza indicated to us the other day, can the township knowingly say, oh, well. And I don't think that's what you guys do, but that's just the concern that we had. So thank you very much for listening and answering many of those questions I had.
Thank you very much for the presentation, very much appreciated. So I'd like to turn over to Haley to address some of the questions.
Sure, thank you. So I wrote it all down as you were going, so it might not be in any specific order. I'll just clarify just a few items, unrelated to some other items. So, you mentioned NRUs, or sorry, ARUs. We're not seeking those permissions, so there would be no additional residential units permitted in these homes. So it'll just be a one-unit dwelling. So those ARUs are permitted in other dwellings in the municipality, but we are having those provisions removed. So hopefully that alleviates just some concern with traffic. None in this development. So it's just for one unit in the house, one main unit. The size, as we mentioned, is proposed to be 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. It is regulated by the zoning provisions, and we are not seeking any other changes to the zoning. We're not seeking a reduced lot coverage to have a bigger house. We're not seeking reduced setbacks to your lot lines. We're not seeking an increased height. The only provision we're seeking is the reduction in the lot area, which doesn't impact the size itself of the dwelling. So we're not seeking to change, say what your property is zoned would be the same that applies to these dwellings. So just a couple minor items there. So I understand there was some obviously concerns with the sightlines, and I think I'll let Will take some of that, but I think you had mentioned the sight lines and the speed limit coming east on Badenoch. So I think perhaps Will can comment on that assessment, because you don't have the same crest coming eastward into Morriston. And then enforcement of one way, I can't quite comment on the enforcement piece of that. I know I've been around one-way streets, I've spent some time in Hamilton where there's quite a few. And I think it does take some time for residents to realize it's one way and comply with that. But the hope is that if it were to be one way, at a certain point, compliance would be there. Yeah, so I might pass it over now to Will to answer some of the traffic-related comments.
Thank you. Lot to digest, so thank you very much for your comments. So I think I'll go through, the beginning. So I think in terms of trip generation, and you mentioned about the number of units and how many cars per unit. I think we got to take it back in terms of the analysis that we do for a traffic impact study is based on AM and PM peak hour, weekday AM and PM, the commuter peak hours. And that's the traffic that we go out and capture. So I think when your neighbor there mentioned that the camera being set up, it was there to capture the AM and the PM peak hour. So we recorded the traffic during the daytime, starting at about 7 in the morning, go till about 8 o'clock at night. And from that data, we captured the highest hour of volume in the morning and the highest volume of hour in the PM peak. And that's what we use for our analysis. And we use the ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineering handbook in terms of calculating the anticipated trips that are going to be generated by a single family home in this case. And that's what we do to put the additional traffic onto the intersections that we studied in the case of this traffic impact study for the peak hour, AM and PM. So I understand that there could be more than 4, vehicles in a house. It all comes down to how much of that traffic is actually leaving in a single hour and in the peak hour. And to that effect, it's throughout the day, like if there was people coming in and out, I mean, yeah, there could be a lot more traffic throughout the entire day, but we always look at the capacity of an intersection for the peak hour when the highest volume of commuter traffic is on the road network. And in this case here with Back Street and Badenoch, the capacity analysis is telling us that there is a lot of capacity. There isn't a lot of existing queuing that would be anticipated is going to be all within acceptable parameters. So hopefully that kind of answers your question about trip generation. And yes, it could be, more traffic throughout the entire day in and out. But in terms of the capacity of that intersection, based on the geometry of the intersection, there is the capacity there in terms of what it can accommodate, way more traffic than what we put on it. And we don't just look at the existing traffic and put the site trips onto it. We look in the future, we add corridor growth 2% per year to the traffic that's there now to anticipate just additional growth. And then that's the analysis that we do in the future as well. And there was nothing identified in terms of queuing or delays that would be unacceptable to the operation of that intersection. With respect to the sightlines, which is, I think, the next big comment here. So in terms of the access onto Highway 6. So we did reach out to MTO via email to request their comment on the possibility of having an access there. They emailed back, they did, based on their review, we don't satisfy the spacing guidelines for any access on Highway 6. their preference is always when there is acceptable access off of lower tier roads, that the municipal roads would be the preferred option or access point and not directly onto an MTO road. And I think there, you know, because it's not just as simple as putting in an access onto Highway 6, there would be other requirements, i.e. left turn lanes in order to just get traffic in and out, not to stop traffic on Highway 6. If you were coming south, you wanted to turn left into the development. There just isn't enough right of way and room there to accommodate additional lanes. And so MTO access spacing guidelines not satisfied. There is acceptable access off of lower tier roads. So they're saying no to Highway 6. And then they looked at both Main Street and Back Street. And their position was that Main Street also doesn't meet their spacing, their access spacing guidelines from the intersection. And so they're saying their preference is to Back Street to be the access to the site. The Main Street, you know, I think you mentioned, and we're talking about one-way system and trying to keep it two-way, or we're trying to keep traffic from this development to go onto Main Street because of its narrow existing pavement. If we were to make Main Street the main access, right, and not Back Street, that would force all of this traffic from this development to use Back Street to get to Main Street to exit onto Badmont, right?
I mean, it wouldn't be a direct line down Main Street into the subdivision?
No, it has to still come from this location where it intersects with Back Street today. But they would all have to travel along Back Street then to get to Main Street.
But there was, on your drawing, that it could go right into the subdivision from Main Street. What's the problem with that? Is it going right into, does the property go all the way along?
We explored this option from the Conservation Authority. There's no policy that allows for the development in the wetland. So we would be completely removing the wetland within this property to accommodate that road. And I believe the Main Street right of way is also not 20 meters. So there would be land acquisition required to meet township standards there.
And is that a deal breaker?
I can't
Yeah.
comment on the
Okay.
township's acquisition policies or abilities, unfortunately.
So in order for Main Street to be considered an access, not having to use Back Street to go to the right of way at the north-south Back Street and into the subdivision with that road you showed, you would have to acquire some lands and get wetland permits from the township,
From the Conservation Authority.
Conservation Authority.
So yeah, so the way we kind of look at, and I'll let Will, I think, continue in the site-wide analysis in a second here. The way we look at both Main Street and Back Street are, you know, there's constraints with each. So we had to really weigh the constraints with each because we did consider both. Main Street MTO does not meet their spacing requirements. It requires destruction of a wetland. It requires acquisition. I believe the right of way width is not 20 meters. Whereas Ox Street, the boulevard width is 20 meters. We can upgrade it to township standards and we can shift that retaining wall to ensure better sightlines. And there's no destruction of wetland with that option. And then the Main Street also does not have sightlines. So there's quite a few items kind of that need to be considered here. So when you're weighing both options, Ox Street does have less constraints and less concerns really from a traffic perspective and an environmental perspective. And perhaps I'll let you
I think the issue of going
continue.
through the wetland when there is an alternate is
Yes.
getting permission to go through the
Exactly.
wetland when there is an alternate access to that road. So that's why when we were looking at it, it was ideal to not use Back Street at all. We didn't assign any traffic to Back Street, and the goal was to make the Back Street and Badmont intersection as best as it can be to make it the ideal and optimum and recommended sort of access to and from. It's the most direct access to and from the proposed site, which would then preclude anybody from having to use Back Street and Main Street, right? So that was the point I wanted to make. So now coming to the sightlines. So we we did, as our traffic impact study, shows, go out there and did a sightline assessment, measurement from the existing Back Street and Badenoch intersection. We also did one from the Main Street and Badenoch intersection. And you were, I think you mentioned 130. I think from our table, the county's is 135 is the requirement based on the posted speed limit of 50
Yeah, because
kilometers an hour.
I think at 130,
Right.
he might have just, he might not have had his book with him to.
Yeah, so that it's based on the posted speed limit, so the requirement that the county has doesn't look at the existing speed of cars, et cetera, so it based on the posted speed limit, it's 135. When we went out there and did our assessment of the Main Street access, I believe we were coming in at about 128, 129, so almost. It's the same crest in the road that affects the sight line from Back Street that is affecting the sightline from Main Street. It's just in the opposite direction, right? So I say we're pretty close, 135, 129, almost satisfied. The sightline assessment that we did from Back Street, we did it two ways. So we did it field measurement, which for us is always the preferred. And from our field measurement, I think we were getting 135, 136, right about there. We also took a look at the drawings of Badenoch Street that we requested from the county from the last time they went out and did their roadworks along there, where they actually did reduce the crest in Badenoch Street and improve the sightlines along Badenoch Street. And based on those drawings, now they're not as-built drawings, which means they're not shot as a survey drawing after the construction. They're the construction drawings. So these are the drawings that would have been used when they went out there to reconstruct the road. And the sight line measured on the drawing comes in at about 129, 130. So, it just about matches what the Main Street. However, in the field measurements came in at about 135 from the existing Back Street intersection. So in our opinion, the sight lines are slightly better from the Back Street and Badenoch intersection than they are from the Main Street intersection. Now, these are taken from the existing alignment of Back Street. So one thing to keep in mind is what we're proposing in terms of the reconstruction of Badenoch Street or Back Street to town standards is also shifting of that road slightly to the east, further away from the crest. So it does improve the sightlines by about 10 meters or so from where the new location of any vehicle that's sitting there waiting to turn will be further away from the crest of the road. So because of those two things, we're saying that the sightlines from Back Street and Badenoch are better than they are from Main Street. I heard your comment about the speeds along the road. So we had a speed study done on Badenoch Street. Now, our speed study was done west of the Back Street, pretty much towards the top of the crest of the curve there, because that's the traffic that we're interested in seeing. The speed is that was leaving the town coming east, right towards Back Street, because that's the vehicle that the vehicle that are traveling over the crest that the motorists need to see in order to be able to make that left turn. Looking to the west, there's plenty of sight lines. We can see vehicles. So even if the speed of a vehicle approaching from the east is 80 kilometers or 100, there's sufficient sight lines there to be able to see that vehicle. So our concern is with coming over the crest and being able to see that traffic. So I believe you had mentioned the speed study that was done was between Curry and Back Street, which is west of Back Street. So it doesn't surprise me that it's coming in, east. It doesn't surprise me that it's coming in at a higher speed, because that is when it turns into 80 kilometers an hour, and a lot of the traffic in both directions is either coming in and slowing down by the time they get in, but they probably don't slow down until they get into the town. Or they're speeding up.
It's still 50 there for quite a while.
Excuse me,
It's
we're having a discussion. You'll have your opportunity.
So I understand, coming from that where there is very little side friction and no driveways, that the speed would be higher. Our speed study, as I said, was done to the west of Back Street, and we were getting about 59, 60 kilometers as the 85th percentile speed limit. It was, we did the speed study over a 24-hour period. And that's what we used then for the design speed of our sightline assessment. Did I miss anything?
No, is all of that data and are those reports available for the public to see?
So we do mention the speed study and what the results were, and it's in our TIS and in the appendix, and the sightline figures are all in the appendix
And
as
that's
well.
all available
Yes.
to us?
Yes, it is.
Take that.
Okay. Anything else to add, Jesse, or?
Sorry through the chair, I don't have anything else to add. It's,
With respect to the ARUs, it's a provincial matter, and the comment was made that they don't have to apply the Canada.
Sure. So ARUs, they are a provincial matter. However, they're a provincial matter on urban areas that are serviced. So these lands do not meet that criteria because they would be wells and septic systems. The township zoning bylaw permits ARUs, however, the exception that would apply would be that ARUs would not be permitted on these lands. And part of the reason why we were considering that, why that's being considered is because of the density of the lands being less than an acre, so.
Thank you. Okay, so let's turn back to the audience. Are there any other members of the audience that'd like to come up, ask a question? Would you please come forward, state your name and address, 10 minutes to speak.
Mike Van Lee at 7519 Wallington Road 36.
Everything.
I just wanted to clarify, sorry, it's been an interruption, but it doesn't just turn to 50 right there. There is a sign there just before the back street there, but it's actually quite further down coming from. It's just like almost at the 401 basically, right? The other thing I wanted to just mention was, the sightlines that you guys are talking about, these are minimum requirements, right? So when we're talking minimum requirements, you guys are playing around with a few meters here or there, like it's, like an average or whatever, but it's their minimum requirements. I think that's a bad idea in general, to kind of be skirting along the minimum requirement, because it's basically scraping the bottom of the barrel when it comes to building code for anything, like I wouldn't want my house built at minimum requirements just because it barely passes code. I wanted to know that, it's built with a little bit of thought and whatnot, right, that goes into it. The other thing is your average speed is still above the posted speed limit, right? So we're dealing with minimum requirement sightlines, but then now well, when it comes to speed, it's not, we know that people are driving 50 kilometers an hour, right? It's been a major problem for all of us on that road, especially when there's a school bus and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But anyway, I would just kind of leave that thought there, you know what I mean? We don't want to be kind of doing things to the minimum. The other thing I wanted to mention was we have with 21 lots, you guys say that you want to reduce the minimum lot size for houses that are built. Most of the homes that are there that you guys are making reference to are like to the community, we're built with, when these pictures were taken, 100 years ago, most of those houses are 1,000, 1,200 square feet, and they're old century homes, and things were a little bit different back then, right? So the majority of the homes that are being built now are built to a higher standard, a lot more people, a lot more consumption. I think 21 houses is a lot. It's a lot of traffic, it's a lot of water, it's a lot of water coming out of the ground and water going back into the ground in the septic beds. And it's gonna put a lot of strain on the water table and everything, in my opinion. That's this is kind of where I know we didn't really bring it up last time, but it's the size of the plots. But I think it's a major thing that is kind of being a little bit overlooked with traffic, and it'll kind of be, it's all coming together with, you know, the amount of houses that are gonna be there. The house size, I think is, you know, is great, you know, because, you know, there's a lot of major big homes there, right? But keeping with, you know, the community, I think it's, you know, 1 acre's small enough for a home of that size and to be elegant and to be nice. Person. The other thing I wanted to mention was Highway 6, you said was controlled access. I was wondering if there was, I know you had brought this up, and a lot of people are talking about it, when the bypass does come, will it be, you know, won't be a highway anymore, will it, right? So it'll be, will the control access be, will it be still a point of conversation, or is this just a temporary thing, or like right now? That's all I wanted to know, but I know it's a lot more. You guys have to dig in and kind of reach out to MTO about that, right? They've already procured all the land for this bypass, so apparently it's coming, but you know what I mean? It's gonna really change the way everything happens in Morrison, so.
Okay, thank you. So I was wondering if you can address the Marston bypass.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, yeah,
Towards the access.
I can try, I mean, I don't know if MTO, once the bypass gets constructed, is going to downgrade this from an access control. They do maintain access corridor control through a lot of their highways, even though it's not, you know, a higher order like Highway 6 would be. Just for this exact purpose, they want to be able to maintain control over permitting access onto their roads. But I can't speak for that, but I think we don't know when that bypass is going to be in, and they're trying to make a decision now for this to be constructed now. And they're using that for their decision making. Your comment about sorry, let me just look back about about the minimum requirements, right? It's a fair comment, and I think the one thing that we got to take back here is that we are not proposing this access because we have a bunch of frontage along Badenoch and we can decide where the access is going to go. I would agree, we would locate it as far as possible. But in this case, it's an existing intersection, and we are choosing the best option that we have available to us in terms of the access. And we're also going above and making it better than it is today, both with the retaining wall and with shifting it further away from the crest by moving it over to the east to improve it, so that we're not just scraping the bottom of the barrel, as you said, to the best of our ability in terms of how much room we have to be able to move it. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Could you comment about our hydrogeologist?
Yeah, so the hydrogeologist has reviewed the application. The hydrogeologist did not have concerns with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. They had, there were technical conditions that were intended to be addressed through future plan of subdivision. One of the items that they wanted was using potentially the lower aquifer. But
Thank you. Okay, any other members of the audience who'd like to come forward and speak or ask questions? Yes, please come forward. State your name and address, please.
James Doors, 7515 Wellington Road 36, or Badenoch Street.
Thank you.
Beside Lucy. I don't recall the last meeting that we talked about Back Street being a one-way and traffic studies at that. Traffic study with the increased traffic that will be if you make that a one-way. Coming out onto that intersection is now really becoming in Main and up back and out again. That's going to increase it, and mailboxes are all there. So the whole community on the east side of Highway 6, or most of it, comes to there for the mailboxes. That's going to increase the traffic coming out to that intersection as well.
Just wonder if we can.
The short answer is no. I mean, we didn't update our traffic impact study. That was just something that was discussed at the last meeting, and then I think went back to the town and was just a point of discussion to say, is that possible? Would it help? And but I think the comment that I made earlier, all that traffic, if we made that one-way street, that would be redirected to back in Badenoch. I personally don't have an issue with capacity at that intersection. As I said, it's very low right now in terms of volumes or even the projected future. I am confident that we can relocate that traffic, and from a capacity standpoint, that intersection would not fail.
Okay. The thing I was. We talked about the speed, and I think we have to be forward enough thinking if we're going to do something about reducing the speed there, because we know that it's more than. We know it's more than 50 going both directions, always is. Like they're going past my driveway at 60 miles an hour at times, for sure, coming out of the village. If you're gonna reduce that speed, that's gonna have a direct effect on the other Fox Street and Curry, because you're gonna start, when you slow the traffic down there, people are gonna go through Curry and Ox Street, and you're gonna increase the flow of traffic there. So whatever happens on Badenoch or 36 to reduce speed is gonna have a direct effect on Curry. So and if the traffic light goes there, I guarantee Curry and Ox are gonna get busier, especially when the 401 backs up. That's gonna become the main thoroughfare to Highway 6. So then you'd be looking at another light on Highway 6 again. And where it's Curry that comes up there, right? So I think we have to look at a little bit bigger picture than just that intersection, because whatever we do there is gonna affect the other ones.
Make a quick point.
It's guaranteed to happen. It's human nature. But you won't change that.
Thank you very much. So a very good point for us to take into consideration. Are there any other members of the audience who like to ask questions? No, okay, then let's go online, see if there's any attendees watching the meeting would like to provide comments or ask questions. Carly, please speak, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, it's Carly Seeley, 24 Back Street in Morriston. Just a couple comments and then some follow-up questions. So just want to state that I certainly don't support Back Street turning into a one-way. Between 3 and 4 buses come down our street morning and after school. And turning that into a one-way with any other cars in addition to it, with the 21 houses being put in, is just going to cause a huge backlog. So that's the first sort of comment as far as that one goes. And then the access off of Main Street, just a few points to touch on that. I think that the developer is just looking for an easier, less expensive option for access. There's ways that you can cross over the wetlands. Yeah, it might cost them more money, but it's certainly an option. But as far as the safety goes, keeping the access coming on to Back Street from Badenoch, I can't even count the amount of times coming out onto that street. And I'm driving the speed limit. I'm cautious. I'm aware of what people are driving going eastbound from 6. They've come maybe a kilometer and they're already exceeding the 50-kilometer speed limit at that. And to judge whether you're nosing out past the retaining wall, whether it's moved back or not, the speed people are driving at the crest of that hill is just a huge safety issue. And so I think that if a separate study is done for both entrances on Main and Back Street, done by the township, that they'll find some different answers than what we've currently been told this evening. And then the speed study that the planners were speaking to, 24 hours isn't enough to give us a proper answer on speeds coming along that section of the road. As a previous comment was stated, people are driving 100 kilometers an hour coming westbound because they've started at 80 and they've barely slowed down when the 50 sign starts at the other aux. But coming in from going eastbound from the light, even though it's a 50-kilometer-hour zone, they're exceeding it tenfold. And then with that crest, you nose out there, and every other time I pull out, someone has to go onto oncoming traffic, and it's a huge safety concern. Not to mention if there's any snow or any other conditions that are going to impede any stopping abilities. So just wanted to make those comments. Had a couple of other notes that I jotted down. I think I've covered everything.
Do you have any specific questions of the,
Maybe just a question on if it's a possibility of the township creating an access study for both Main Street and Back Street to show the feasibility with it being a little bit more safe and efficient from a Main Street entrance versus the Back Street entrance. They're coming in slower from the lights. There's no crest on the hill to enter on Main Street. They don't have to expropriate anybody's property to appease their, entranceway. So I'm just wondering if the township might be able to do something with that. As well as Main Street being a partial access. How is it partial? It's either not an access or it is an access. How is it able to be a partial access?
you understand you have a hand up too?
I'd like to respond to using Main Street as an access. I think Main Street has been thoroughly considered. There are significant constraints with Main Street. Specifically the width of the right of way is well below standard. As mentioned, crossing a wetland is this major environment, is a major natural heritage concern that would be very difficult to challenge. There is also the crest is as indicated by the traffic expert. The crest does impact both Main Street and Aux Street. I don't see any value, from my perspective, I don't see any value to consider to ask for another study for Main Street, given the constraints that have already been, identified. But given those constraints already. But I will let the traffic consultant experts respond as well.
We're just asking you to consider the sightlines compared to Back Street.
Answer that question.
I think I would just reiterate from our measurements that the Back Street and Badenoch intersection had better sight lines, albeit slightly, including the relocation and shifting of that road further east away from the crest than the existing Main Street does. I'll just leave it at that.
And the township can confirm that there's better sight lines at Back Street versus Main Street?
We have a transportation consultant here. Is one of you could comment on that as well?
Sure, thank you. We have been looking at iterations of this plan and options for this plan. Not all of the information that we've reviewed is in a report. But my recollection is that when we were having this discussion about Main versus Back Street, we did actually sit down and look at I'm looking to, sorry, Carly, I don't know if you can see me. I'm looking to my colleague here. I think we met and looked at the sight lines online. So the applicant's transportation consultant looked at those sight lines. They shared them with us. They're not in a report. I say that just to say we have actually done the comparison. It just doesn't show up necessarily in a report because we've been having all these discussions over time. I'm satisfied. I've reviewed the analysis that's been done for Back Street. And I'm in agreement that the sightlines there are appropriate. They meet the standards. And the one thing I would say about the standards is there are factors of safety built into those standards. They're not bare minimum standards. They're the standards that we go to when we say, at what point do we say this is going to be okay? These are the standards that we go to. We're meeting those standards, and they're reputable Transportation Association of Canada standards. They've been around and work with them every day. I'm not concerned that I hear what everybody's saying, and I'm not trying to be dismissive of what we're hearing about the sightline concerns. But we use these standards and we go out in the field and take these technical measurements at times when we're unsure by just looking. We can't tell by looking in the field. You can't just stand there and say, is it enough? Because it feels uncomfortable. We're hearing from you when you make that turn from Back Street onto Badenoch. It feels uncomfortable. It feels unsafe sometimes. But that's where we go to this guidance, these guiding documents that give us the kinds of guidance that we need to help make decisions. And they tell us, based on very scientific calculations, how much time, how much space we need and how much time we need for various vehicles to turn. And these are the guidelines that are guiding our decisions. And we are able to make those, meet those guidelines with the two changes that we've both highlighted. So one has to do with the retaining wall, and that has more to do with where the car sits relative to the road, and less about the length of the distance. It has to do with what's in your way and how close do you have to go into traffic. But the second thing is the road is being shifted over a little bit. So it is going to improve the sight distance in that location and make it a little bit more comfortable than what you have today.
Sorry,
Do you mind if I add
sure.
a
please
comment?
do.
I think it's important to highlight at the very beginning of this process, without any consideration of cost, we truly did evaluate both accesses equally. There wasn't any sort of, we prefer Back, we prefer Main Street. Originally, we had hoped to provide one through road. So an access on Main and an access on Back, so you didn't have a roundabout in this development. So this was absent of any cost considerations. And from that and all the input from the technical experts, Back Street is the less limiting access point. So I just want to make that clear that from the very beginning, we did try to evaluate both equally. There wasn't a consideration of, will this cost more, will this cost more? We really wanted to provide the most appropriate access to this proposed development.
In terms of this not being documented, is there a way of taking the notes and providing a document to show the analysis you did with respect to Main Street?
There is some in the traffic study, but we could look back at the various submissions we made. I believe there's part of the comment and response matrix. We submitted updated letters, so we can make sure, I believe all of that would be accessible, but we can provide that information.
Any other questions, Carly?
Just to confirm, the reports between access comparing Main and Back Street, is that what you just said you'd be able to gain access, give access to?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, it's part of
So
the submission.
we'll be able to see both the comparison between the entrances to both based on sight lines.
Unfortunately, it's not like one report comparison document that says this is Main Street versus Ox Street. It is kind of within the traffic study we have submitted that it reviews all the transportation aspects. So we can provide that to you and any addendums that were submitted after that.
If there isn't exactly something comparing the two, can a study be done that compares both accesses?
Sorry. Like I don't think at this point it's appropriate to be asking for another study to compare both the accesses. If the information is available, I think it's appropriate to use that information. However, we know that Main Street is significantly constrained and has significant technical issues with providing an access to the site. So I don't think it's appropriate at this point to ask for for another sightline analysis.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. So all this information be coming forward to council, and council can make a decision at that time whether or not we would want a face-to-face comparison between the two options, but certainly provide the data that you have, perhaps that's sufficient information to address the concerns of the resident. Any other questions, Carly?
No, that would be it. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other members of the audience who would like to ask questions? This is the virtual audience. Daniel, would you please state your name and address and pose your questions?
Hi there, it's Daniel Sisolak and as well Elizabeth Sisolak. Just a shout out to Kathy and Hans for the great work there. We own a property, it's one of the few lots there, 7537 Wellington Road 36.
East.
And it's, we back on to the subject property and we understand where the houses are subject to be built. But where can we find information or what information can you tell us about the rest of the property, in particular the wetland area, the forested area, again, that our property abuts up to? Is there any future development that's going to be going on there or?
And a secondary question to that, are there any alternative access points other than the two that are under consideration now that might be feasible based on further research, investigation, and study based on the overall proposal?
Right, okay.
Sure, thank you. With regards to the EP lands, they're identified in the official plan of the County of Wellington as, I believe their terminology is environmental protection. We are also rezoning those lands to environmental protection as well. They are now, but we're actually enlarging that area through the zoning application. This will provide for these lands' future protection. If they were to be developed, they would have to go through this formal rezoning process. I don't see that happening. There's no intent to develop these lands. We're zoning them for their long-term protection, so there's no development anticipated for these EP lands. And then with regards to access, there is no other access options other than the ones we've discussed here tonight. That the property doesn't have access on any other municipal right-of-ways other than those discussed tonight.
Okay, and so no plans for that to become park space, because that is something we had heard when we were actually looking at severing the lot that we currently own there. So it's not.
To help you out, Danielle, there was a report before council today asking whether staff were asking whether or not the township should assume those lands. We basically deferred the decision until we have some more information. So the jury's still out on that. Certainly that's an option to consider, that township may assume ownership of those lands or may not.
Okay.
But decision has not been made.
Okay, thank you. And we do also have concerns that we always did when we lived beside the lot there for many years with children. Like this speeding along there is ridiculous. So
Yeah.
60, by the time you're getting into like back street there, but where we lived, the motorcycles, it was ridiculous. It's one of the reasons we moved actually.
Yeah.
And
And I can also say back in the day, and we're going back probably 20 plus years ago, I put a proposal together with a group within the community, and we were able to get the traffic speed reduced to 50 kilometers per hour because of all the complaints we got for the speed on that road from all points. And I know you've done studies and I know you've done different areas within the geography of the area, but I can tell you with 100% certainty, the road speeds on that highway are over the top, and it is a danger zone, and something needs to be done to mitigate it because it is a serious problem. And living there for 25 plus years, we saw it grow over time based on the growth of the community.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the questions. Steve, anybody else in the audience?
Not currently. If anyone would like to speak, if you could please use the raise hand function, you'll find it at the bottom of your screen.
Okay, let me take one last, forum of the audience here. Anybody else have any other questions or comments before we turn it over to council? No? Okay, so it's, council's opportunity to ask, any clarification questions regarding this application. And, start with you, Councilor Glenn.
No, I don't have any questions. We did have, this same report on our council agenda earlier today. And council had an opportunity to ask questions of the consultant at that time. Which we all did. So for the members of the public, I would also encourage you to take a look at the video once it's posted from the discussion that took place earlier today, but I don't have any additional questions.
Councilor Bailey.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess it's just a question for traffic consultant. You had mentioned the term acceptable queuing at Back and Badnot. I guess I'm just looking for clarification on what is acceptable queuing at an intersection.
I think we look at what excessive queuing is gonna impact. So if the queuing from Badnot was to extend back towards Back Street or an intersection, or block a significant access point onto the road, we would say that excessive. But in this case, there is one or two vehicles at the most queuing in terms of our future analysis. So when I say there was no excessive queuing or no queuing concerns at that intersection, that would be from, let's say, Back Street onto Badnock, or alternatively, a left turn from Badnock onto Back Street. If they just weren't able to make it because of the volume being so high, that would queue up then traffic on Badnock as well, if traffic couldn't get around a vehicle that was stopped trying to turn left, which we didn't find either in our analysis.
Okay, so I'm picturing new development traffic leaving at morning. Coming on back, I was calling it off today, back, wanting to turn left, say, to get out to the 401. So would it be acceptable queuing to have, say, 10 cars waiting to turn left onto Badnot? Is that?
Our analysis doesn't show that there would be 10 cars waiting.
No.
No.
In the peak morning, what was the number that we were?
In terms of volume or in terms of queuing? Sorry.
Well, the queuing is going to depend on the volume of traffic trying to leave.
Not necessarily. It depends on the volume and gaps of traffic on Badnock. So we can have a lot of traffic, but little traffic on Badnock, and everybody can get out with the gaps that exist. Or we can have a lot of traffic on Badnock and only 2 cars trying to get out, and they would be both queued because they just wouldn't be able to get out.
And then I guess just for the public and for clarification, let's say a decision or the time comes for a decision for council to make on whether to accept this application or not, and we're not comfortable with the access point. What happens? What's the process that would happen then after a denial of an application? Maybe Jesse.
So the application would go, I mean, the applicant would have the opportunity to appeal the decision. Then it would go to the Ontario Land Tribunal. At this time, there would have to be reasons, right, that are given. At this time, like we've had the application circulated to technical consultants, and we also had the application circulated to various review agencies. So basically, a lot of the technical comments and the planning merits based on provincial policy is what would be considered in the decision of the tribunal.
in favor of the applicant?
It would, I mean, a decision might not necessarily be in favor of the applicant. But what would happen is that the application would be looked at to see if it's consistent, if it complies with matters of provincial interest. If it's consistent with the provincial planning statement in the county and the local official plan. In making the decision, the tribunal would be looking at the technical comments that have been provided. So that's what would be the focus. And I know there has been technical studies completed and there has been technical comments that have been provided on the applications.
Okay, okay. So presumably it would go through approval based on the studies that have been done and all the technical reviews that have.
I don't want to go there, but I can't predict how it would go. But those would be the considerations.
Okay.
So the technical comments and consistency and conformity with provincial and county and local policies.
Okay, thanks for that.
Counselor.
First. Actually, thank you to members of the public. I know this is time out of your busy lives to come here and delegate. So just to thank you, because I think I quite value just hearing your personal experiences with this whole process. So just a thank you on that one. A couple questions from my standpoint. So Kaylee, I know you noted the size of the potential properties being 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. I'm assuming the maximum would be 3,000 square feet with the houses, presumably. Was there any maximum number of garages in the proposal? I didn't see that, but maybe I missed that. Is that a criteria that the developer's looking to maintain?
Through this process, there's no assigned minimum or maximum garages. So the homes would be constructed based on the applicable zoning provisions, and we aren't proposing to change those. So whatever kind of limiting factors you have in your zoning bylaw for all properties, I think in Morrison, they're all very similarly zoned. Those would apply to these sites as well.
Okay, that's helpful. I was just curious what those were. I think the rest of my questions are probably more for the county road aspect, and I'm not sure where these go, but crest management within Morriston, is that even a viable option? Like, I realize saying that it's like a massive undertaking to modify the elevation of a road in town. Like that's a big piece, but I'm curious, you know, throughout this process, and I'm look at that as well as, you know, potential calming measures that can be implemented on the county road as mitigation aspects to reduce the risk level, if you will. I'm not sure if there's no really here from the county to speak to that, but
I think you covered that off during our meeting at council, so staff took that away.
Fair enough. Yeah, and I guess my last question is more, lot 1 on the map. I'm just curious where the access is on that one, because I look at Street A. Where would that access be?
I would have a driveway directly from Main Street.
Okay. Exclusively. Okay. I think that's all the questions I have.
Okay, so does the applicant have any further information they'd like to provide?
I don't, just thank you for the discussion, and I hope we're able to answer some additional questions tonight, and looking forward to the next steps in the process.
Okay, thanks, Gordon.
Sorry, just one of the questions we heard tonight, or comments, was about the naming of Back Street versus Fox Street. And even at our council meeting earlier today, this was an item of clarity that none of us are really clear as to whether it is Back Street or Fox Street. And given that there is another Ox Street just down the road, I'm wondering if maybe we can all agree here today on it being Back Street and calling it Back Street from here moving forward to avoid confusion moving forward in this planning process. I'm not sure if that's something that we can agree to, but
We're not making any decisions.
just, I guess that is just my comment moving forward, that I will now refer to it exclusively as Back Street.
Right. Okay, meeting concluded, so I declare this public meeting closed. Council will take no action on the proposal tonight. Staff will be reporting at a later date with a recommendation for council's consideration. If you wish to receive further notification of this proposal, please email or call planning@portsmouth.ca or by phone at 519-763-1226 extension 4, or contact township staff during regular business hours. Only those persons who leave their names will be provided further notification. If you wish to speak to the proposal was brought before council in the future, you must register as a delegation with the municipal clerk.